How we first met?
Yeah.
I have a very distinct memory. This kid, Jason Shuman, cold emailed me about we should work together. Like, if you can get to the last round, like, and if you really want to work in venture, you'll get a job. You just have to, like, grind it out and make sure it's the right fit.
I think in this business, it's one thing to be intellectually curious, but you also just need to be so freaking hungry.
I mean, we're in a sales job, 100%. Like, we are selling primary the brand ourselves to everyone. We're trying to give a commodity away at the end of the day, money. How can I build deep relationships? And the relationships are just different.
How seed investing's ultimately changed now. A, deals move way faster than they ever did before. B, we can't go talk to 20 of our friends and get a bunch of deal flow anymore because 20 of our friends want the exact ownership that we want in the industry. Sam Toole, special edition. Welcome to Change Order.
Thanks for having me. It was really hard, walking down one flight of stairs.
I mean, we decided we should do a special edition because, when you put a podcast studio in an office and, we wanted a distraction for an hour of time, this seemed like an obvious thing to be doing, right?
It's pretty easy.
But we also do go back a long period of time. So
we go back, what is it, dude, 12 years?
It's almost 12 years now.
Almost 12 years.
Speaking of where we go back to.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what your side of the story is from how we met.
How we first met?
Yeah.
I have a very distinct memory of how we first met. Not in person. I remember, so I was running ACK Surf, the clothing company. So I started the surf school, started the clothing company. We can talk more about that. And I was in my basement of my house that I grew up. And I remember looking at I was walking around with my laptop, being like, this kid, Jason Shuman, cold emailed me about we should work together. And you can talk about Category 5, or you were running a boat shoe company at the time. I don't remember the exact email. I just remember being like, yeah, this is great. We should work, trying to work with more companies. This is going to be a great way to acquire some more customers. And I luckily responded.
This is like the non-glamorous side, by the way, of starting companies. You were sitting in your parents' basement and I was like sitting in my childhood bedroom.
Yeah. Parents' basement, it was like one of those basements where it's like there was one window, but it was unfinished. We just had boxes and boxes and boxes of clothes. We packaged all the clothes there. And so it was like our little offices. We'd do all the packaging and bring it to
ship it out.
Yeah, ship it out. Exactly. Bring it to the post office.
I think the version of my side of the story was I remember this was 2013. We both had just graduated from college, I think, actually.
Yeah.
And this ACK Surf brand was popping up all over Barstool. And I was like, man, how are these guys getting so much free advertising on Barstool? But whatever it's doing.
We didn't know it was free at the time.
I mean, I just saw all these posts, and there was a difference between sponsored posts and, what the way ACK Surf was being shown. But I'm like, our boat shoe company was going after fraternities and sororities, primarily as our customer base. And you guys seem to be getting a lot of eyeballs. And I was like, well, I got to figure out a way to partner with ACK Surf and put that little wagon wheel, logo on our shoes and maybe do a special edition to get some free eyeballs out of it. And so I think I found Sam's email on, I don't even know if it was LinkedIn or actually, no, I probably guessed it. I think it was just Sam or Sam.Toole or S-Toole.
Sam Toole at ACK Surf or Sam at ACKSurf.com, because I still have random things at apps that I signed up for years ago where it's you need to use Sam. I'm like, I don't have access to that email anymore.
So I cold emailed you and I was like, let's do a partnership. And then you end up responding to my email. And here we are, however many years later, 11 years later, you have 2 kids, you're married, and we both work at the same venture firm. And that's the way that we both got together.
Yeah, literally. I don't remember when was the first time we met in person.
I don't either. It might have been.
I distinctly remember going to your offices when you had offices when we had moved up to Boston at that point. Because so the summer after college, we stayed on Nantucket and then said, all right, we're going to go do a bunch of college tours. And we moved up to the Boston area, and we were on the road every weekend, basically doing college parties and events as a way to create content and sell product and to do that. And I remember coming out to
Framingham,
exactly.
That was the second meeting, because actually I remember the first meeting. I went into, I think it was Chestnut Hill, and you guys were doing a photo shoot and had rented a super expensive camera that we don't need to talk
Oh,
about, but it was a hilarious, like,
it was
slow
Brighton.
motion.
It wasn't Chestnut Hill, but Brighton.
Brighton, and like you guys were like filming some ads, and I was like, man, these guys are having a really good time while they run this company. But I think it'd be fun to dive into, we're gonna dive into personal stories today.
Yep.
So why don't you talk about how you started ACK Surf?
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Nantucket, as you know. I grew up surfing and loving surfing. So in high school, I decided I didn't want to keep landscaping as a job because I used to cut hedges, which is, if you've
Not
never
nearly
cut
as
hedges,
fun as surfing.
It's not very much fun. So I started to teach surf lessons the first year of college. The guy I used to teach surf lessons for said, "Hey, I should sell you my surf school. I'm not going to come back anymore. I'm going to do that." And I said, "No, why don't I just buy all your used boards and from you anyway? There's no value. You're not going to be able to sell them and start my own surf school." So I did that.
Ruthless.
And it was great. And I'd done an internship for the first like 6 weeks out of my freshman year here in New York at like a municipal bond shop. And I was like, they were great people. It's like, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Buy and sell municipal bonds. So for 4 years, all through college, I just went back to Nantucket and taught surf lessons. It was a great business. It was all cash. I hung out on the beach all day. When the waves were too big to teach surf lessons, I got to surf all day. And the last year I was involved, we had like 10 instructors. So I didn't really teach.
Damn.
I just hung out on the beach.
How much were you guys doing?
We're doing like 70, 80K of revenue over July and August. So it was great. And I'd like leave to go back to school with 20 grand in my pocket.
I'm surprised you couldn't charge more for surf lessons in
Nantucket.
We
charged $70 a head.
That seems like you underpriced Nantucket.
Which was, no, it was the market price. It was good. I always joke it was like my first sales job because I'd go up and convince people to trust me with their children. And take them out in the water. So it was like, instead of cold calling or, knocking on a door, it was like you knock on the umbrella sort of and say, "Hey, like little Jimmy should take a surf lesson right now." And when we were doing that, we started selling clothes at the same time because there was just an easy opportunity to make additional money. And there's a bunch of big parties on Nantucket. Back in the day, there were these big July 4th parties. And we would create July 4th tank tops and July 4th t-shirts. And I'd fill my backpack full of them.
Did it just say ACK Surf or like what was it?
It said like, it was like the, we take the PBR logo and put like ACK Surf on them, July 4th. And we'd go to the beach and we'd have 300 of them. And we would just hawk t-shirts all day. And I distinctly remember one of the years selling the like tank top off my back to some drunk college kid. And when we were doing that and teaching surf lessons, we met Dave Portnoy,
who is
the founder of Barstool Sports, and taught him surf lessons, him and his then wife, Renee, and started to get to know them over a handful of years. And they were doing a lot of stuff in merch and still do a lot of stuff with merch today. And talked to him and basically convinced him and said, "Hey, maybe there's an opportunity for us to work together. You should invest a little bit of money." He invested a little bit of his own personal money. And then there was a part of that was we get to sort of align with Barstool from an eyeballs perspective, which is why you saw it, right? Otherwise, there's no reason you would have seen ACK Surf popping up.
So Dave Portnoy was your first ever investor?
Yeah.
Damn. Lucky you.
I really wish I owned some Barstool stock.
You really should have taken the acquisition.
I should have just figured out a way to do that. That would have been much better.
But when did you like change things from a surf school selling t-shirts out of a backpack to an e-commerce first store?
It was the last year of college. So it was junior year of college. We said, "Hey, let's raise a little bit of money to do this." And like, this is what we're going to do after college. And I started it with my buddy who I started the surf school with. By the way, the surf school still in Nantucket. If you go to Nantucket, Nobody or Beach, ACK Surf, still there.
Gavin's got you.
Gavin's running it, and doing a great job. And, so it was that between junior and senior year and like senior year, end of senior year, was full-time ACK Surf. That's what we were doing. And we still ran the surf school because it was great. There was like some branding stuff we had to figure out as we were selling.
People didn't want their kids running around ACK Surf gear at that point in time.
Yeah, it was just that we all figured it out. So, what about you though? When did you start Category 5?
My journey was a lot longer and potentially more intentional than yours was.
Yeah, it was intentional. It was just intentional.
Yeah, I mean, you did your first leverage buyout of surfboards and then made it into a surf school, which I love. I started my company sophomore year of college. I remember I got back to the University of Miami and I took a brand new pair of boat shoes out of the box and I wore the shoes to class and I was like bleeding by the time I got to the class. And I was like, why the hell is it 2010 and you can buy a brand new pair of shoes and the things are not comfortable and give you blisters?
Yeah.
And so, as you know today, because I usually get fixated on ideas like frequently, I ended up going and figuring out how to reverse engineer these boat shoes for the next 2 years and basically upgrade the materials and upgrade the fit, because we found that men tended to buy shoes that were actually too large for their feet on average. So we shrunk our shoes
everyone wants to have a bigger foot.
Everyone wants a bigger shoe size. So we shrunk the shoe size down by like a half. We made a collar that like locked your foot in and then put PU foam insoles into boat shoes, which no one had done before. And that literally took about 2 years of late night Skype calls, by the way, not Zoom, Skype back then.
Yeah.
And me like manually, annotating PDFs to show this factory in China, like what they needed to change around. And so
was one of your friends a designer or did you just learn how to?
No.
You just learned how to do it.
You actually
want
to
design a shoe.
You want to know how these things are made? I went out and I bought a bunch of shoes that I thought were like similar to the style I wanted. And this is actually how, by the way, a lot of shoe designers actually start.
Yeah.
We shipped the shoes to China. And prior to me shipping them to China, I took photos of them and I then drew and described exactly the changes. Then the manufacturer would make the change with a prototype sample. They would send it back to the States.
Yeah, sure.
So you can imagine like all of the back and forth, all the iterations, it would take you like a month to get the new thing back. And then at some point in time, I started to learn about, Warby Parker and Glossier and how they were in the early days of their businesses selling direct to consumer. I was like, that might be really interesting in doing an e-commerce thing. But I also thought that customization was going to be a big thing and that would be a good way to differentiate, because if you could put yacht club logos, fraternity logos, colleges on boat shoes, that would probably sell pretty well.
Yeah.
And you could target people back then, you could target people using Facebook in an amazing way, which was by organization and like affinity. And so we ended up going in that direction. Then we ended up launching it. And I say it was literally my brother and my 3 other best friends at the time, summer, August, right before our senior year of college.
And then you were selling boat shoes senior year.
We sold
to a bunch of like kids in Miami, basically.
No, everywhere, dude. We launched with 120 campus reps across 80 college campuses day one.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You did have a bunch of reps.
It was crazy. And it was honestly, if I look back on that, I would have had the rep program, but not in the way that we did, which was we had these kids running around. We would ship a box of shoes with different sizes to each campus. We had probably 10 campuses at a time with sample boxes. They would do sizings at fraternities and have kids try them on so they could see how like good it felt. Then they would place an order and then we'd ship it to the next campus like 2 weeks later. Whereas, 33-year-old Jason today, who understands online marketing, probably would have done Facebook a little bit more, which eventually we turned it on. And what was fascinating about it was the customer acquisition cost was like $15.
Yeah.
But we were
so bad at that, mainly and which was so stupid because we just got so much free advertising from Barstool, and we should have been so much better at retargeting. It took months for us to do it well, and it was so silly.
I mean, think about though how different the e-commerce landscape was back then. Like Shopify was a brutal platform in 2013.
Oh yes, ShipStation's still around, still big. I remember, everything was built off Shopify. ShipStation. There weren't a lot of apps that you could really use well.
No, Klaviyo was like in the very early days. So we
Yeah.
used MailChimp to start.
Yeah, we use MailChimp as well. Yeah.
But what's funny, by the way, about that like era of e-commerce founders and operators, so many of the people that we met back then ended up going on to do amazing things, many outside of e-commerce.
Yeah.
But we all were like much more forward thinking and testing things. And so like Alex Realmuto, who's an advisor to Primary,
Yeah.
we met him when he was running a SOC company. Pearson Crass, who now not only has a growth agency but a SaaS company that's like post Series A, was running Crass and Co. And I think Mike Petrakis was running Boast at the time, and he's got Batch. So
yeah, I forgot about him.
it's like this funny, and even the Chubby's guys.
Chubby's guys. Yeah, we did some stuff, some partnership stuff with Chubby's. My instinct was we needed to be like an up and coming rapper with a mixtape. And the goal was to get lots of other people, other rappers on the mixtape that were bigger and better than us, and do partnerships. And that was like, you were the first partnership, but then we did other partnerships. We sold other things. We did some stuff. We tried to do some stuff with Chubby's. We did some stuff. What was the sunglass brand? You know the guy too. He's a Miami guy. I'm blanking on his name. We did some stuff. Dick's sunglasses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we did it. We did something with him, and we started just selling other random products on the website, all with that. But that was our least philosophical approach.
I think I did the opposite, which was I wasn't going to align my brand from a partnership perspective after our thing, but I got to know the founders of a bunch of these companies. And I remember we were in this like weird place where our manufacturer was like, you guys need to ramp up your volume or we're going to like kick you out. And I was like, oh crap. So I was like, we need to go get a bunch of retailers to buy our stuff now.
Yeah, we didn't know retail.
And so I went and I looked up the list of the top retailers for like Southern Tide and what was the belt company? Some random belt company, Smathers and Branson.
Which is still a big company. They're I think they crush it.
They're doing great. And I ended up going online and I made a list of these places and I went over Google Maps and I put it all the way down the East Coast, down to Miami, and then I went back around.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I hit up our campus reps. This was the best piece of our campus reps. And I said, hey, I want you to go to this store with a bunch of your buddies over the course of the next week, and I want you to ask for our shoes. And then I called the retailer, and I was like, hey, man, it's Jason Shuman from
It's a good hack.
From Category 5 calling. Jim Twining from Southern Tide said you're one of his best accounts and I should come meet you. I'm going to be in town next week. Can I come stop by? And literally we ended up getting like 110 retailers or something like that over the course of like 2 months.
I didn't know that's a great hack. We didn't know retail. We used our campus reps just for content. That was all it was.
It was great content though.
It was just content. It was content, and we go to parties and I would sleep on the floor or on a couch at a fraternity. And it would be like, we're going to throw a party. And us throwing a party was like, we'd bring these big tents, we'd give out some free swag, and then just take photos. And we generally do it around weekends or things that there were big parties. But it was just content creation. And this was all, I mean, your campus program was early. It wasn't like now everyone has a campus program.
Yeah.
But at the time, it wasn't a thing. So it actually wasn't super hard to get great campus reps too. We were just like, just send us content. And we just like would hammer social media with it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, both of us, we graduated, we started working on this, and I think within a year and a half, both of us decided to move on.
Yeah.
Walk me through how you made your decision, which I don't actually think, I think we talked about it a little bit back then, but not a lot.
Yeah. So like I said, started the surf school with one of my best friends growing up, like same little league team, baseball, like all the sort of stuff. And great guy to start surf school with. And it was like, perfect. We did this. A year and a half in, it was like kind of this realization on my part that it was like great guy to start surf school with. The skills that we sort of needed in terms of online marketing and some of the design stuff and some of the things, we just had more overlapping skills than complementary at a certain point. And I sort of looked at myself and said, do I want to run an e-commerce brand for the next decade like this? And things were starting to work. We'd been selling stuff. We did 250, 300K of sales in like 9 months. And we were like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to need to raise some more money. This is going to be like a thing. And we were getting ready basically for the summer and starting to think about that. And I just got less excited about the idea of doing it together, which is a really hard conversation. And
how did you approach it?
Poorly would probably be the simplest version of it. Because we were living together at the time. So like we were basically not paying ourselves. We're using surf school money to like basically live. I just think memories of it being like cold up in Boston, as being like, yep, just don't turn the heat on other than like the little space heater and all this sort of stuff, which was silly. Like we were fine. But in our minds, we're like, this is what being like a startup founder is. We got to like do these things. And I came up with an idea in my head where I was like, okay, we're going to do an equity swap, that I'm going to own a little bit of the surf school. You're going to own a little bit of the e-commerce business. But if you own the majority of the surf school and I own the majority of the e-commerce business, I can use your equity. We can go raise capital. I can find a co-founder. This will all be great. And looking back, I just went into the conversation like head on. I didn't do the conversation before the conversation or the conversation before that. Like there wasn't enough warm up.
It was a sudden breakup.
It was a like pent up. I was frustrated, felt like it was like an obvious thing, and it just unraveled. And just was, I have these distinct memories of just like laying in bed, thinking about it beforehand and then afterwards. Cause I'm sure the same thing with you. It's like you pour so much of your heart and soul into it. And it was a small business, but it's still like, this is all I thought about. This is all I did for years. And it becomes so much of your identity. So I don't know if you did it better than I did. You had more people to deal with.
Yeah. Mine happened in different periods of time. You know, I had my 3 friends and my brother. So the first one that we parted ways with, you know, wasn't executing and you know, just wasn't into the business. And I totally get it. We were seniors in college and like you were, you know, jumping between class and parties and doing work. And, you know, I think he knew his heart was in something else.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, and especially now that we're older, I can look back on that time period and be like, okay, if somebody's heart is not in something and they're not truly aligned with that mission, you're actually both doing each other a favor by splitting. And
totally.
That was definitely the case with the first one.
But you learn, you get that perspective with time and age and the moment.
Oh yeah, in the moment it hurts.
Yeah.
I think the second one hurt the most because there was a bit of a complementary skill set, you know, piece where he was running the technology side. And I have a distinct memory of him coming in, you know, one of the last days before we went back for our second semester of senior year, and wanting to move on because, you know, he had a job offer for after college and wanted to enjoy the rest of his senior year. And so that night,
so he was the one who, it wasn't you making the move.
No, that night, no, that was him making the move, deciding to leave. And, you know, I think when he had come in and he had said that to me, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, oh shit. And he's like, well, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, I don't have time to talk about it. I was like, I feel like you made up your mind. I probably can't, you know, change your mind. And I feel like we should process it together at some point. But now I need to figure out a backup plan. Yeah. And how are we going to execute? I needed to think through it and probably went into action mode. And so that's how that part of the relationship ended up ending. But let's fast forward to when I decided to wind down the business. You had first, I remember, like you and I were talking about potentially teaming up.
Yeah, because we had the conversation on my end, and it was like this limbo period on my end where like, is the business, are we going to still run this thing? Is there an opportunity to make it work? And it wasn't super clear yet. And we were both living in, I mean, you were in,
no, I was in Boston. I was still at home in Sudbury.
Yeah, you were at home.
Yeah.
And that was the second time.
That was the second meeting in Framingham.
Yeah, in Framingham.
Yeah. But you had been, I think, winding yours down or knew you wanted to sell the rest of your inventory. Yeah. And I was like, okay, my brother was working on it still with me. He's older. You know, an amazing human, but had this amazing real estate career that he was like putting on hold while I was, you know, trying to chase this thing down. And I didn't really see a future of the business. And I was talking to I met my first couple of VCs, and I, tried recruiting, ironically, like Byron Ling, who worked at Primary, and Paul Hedrick, who then started Tecovas, and all these people. Yeah. And they didn't want to work on it.
How did you know Byron? What was that?
I went and there's one skill I'll give you that I learned early on, because when I decided to start Category 5, that same summer, I got an offer from Egon Zehnder, the headhunting firm. And the case study they gave us, like, for that job was Ruby Tuesdays wants to hire a CMO, go. And I was just like, okay, like, I got to figure out profiles, like the types of profiles of people that would be good for this role. So I did that with Category 5, and I thought about, I should go get somebody who's worked in e-commerce at one of these companies. Maybe they went to business school or worked in consulting, and I should do a bunch of outbound. And Byron worked at Gilt, and then he went to Wharton. And Paul was at, I think, McKinsey or BCG, and then he was at Catterton, which is now L Catterton.
Yeah.
And so I just like started reaching out to people, and ironically, I mean, a bunch of those people went on. The cold email, man. Yeah. But I don't know. Why did I shut it down? Like, your identity is tied up in these things, but if you can't see yourself wanting to do it for the next 10 years, and if you're not thinking about it in the shower, and I personally felt a lot of responsibility for, my friend, my brother, and my investors. But I didn't want to put my life on hold.
What was I'm not sure if we've actually chatted about this before. Like, what was the transition then? So you shut it down, and you came to New York, but like, knowing you probably ran a whole process, right? It wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna move to New York, I got a job. It was like, I'm sure you had a lot of conversations and probably very intentional about it.
To move to New York or to shut it down?
Like, you made the decision to shut it down, and you're like, all right, now I have to figure out what's next. And you worked in VC next, but it was like, there have been a bunch of different things that you could have done. And
so what happened exactly was, when I said I want to shut it down, I remember talking to my dad in the kitchen, and I told him, he's like, all right, like, then you should make sure that you set the other guys up for success, and like, you want to be the last one down the ship. So like, let them know, and then you should get going. So I tried selling the business. I outbounded a lot of people. I called probably 100+ people to see if I could get it acquired. We had a deal on the table. That thing fell apart. So then I looked at our online traffic, and I figured out that if we ran out the rest of the year, that we'd be sold out of shoes by the end of the year, and I'd be able to return, like, call it 0.8x on the capital.
Yeah.
So I did that. But then I was just like lost. What do I want to like do with my life? And I didn't want to start another company again. I had no money. I was 25 pounds heavier than I am now, and like no confidence. I was thinking about going and working for a mutual friend, Chris Wolfel.
Oh yeah.
I had
what was his business called?
Maverick. Which is massive now, and backed by Summit. Maybe I should have done that, but I didn't do that. And then I was helping a friend launch a business when I heard about venture. And venture seemed great because I thought I wanted to start another company, and so I could go meet a bunch of really smart people, learn about industries, and it's just super aligned with like my ideal scenario in life of like helping other people.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know what I did? I drove for Uber and sourced a bunch of deals for free.
Yeah, and probably emailed every VC firm you could find.
Every VC firm I could find. But you didn't. You went and did a different thing. You went into private equity, ironically.
Not
right?
even really. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and was like trying to figure it out. And it's like, I don't know, I got to find something to keep me busy. And was one of those knew a guy who knew a guy sort of situations, and landed at a lower middle cap private equity firm outside of Boston. Again, great guys. But it was like, hey, we have a 6-month project. Come on, see if you like it. If you don't, and all I did was source companies. And they had bought an EHR asset. So this was the first work in healthcare. Because they bought a very small EHR and had bought a practice management software. And then I was basically tasked with finding very small RCM businesses, revenue cycle management businesses, and buying them. And these were mom and pop shops. So I just would build lists of RCM companies all across the country and cold email and cold call them. and try to find businesses that were interested in selling. And their whole vision was like, you layer in the HR and the practice management and RCM all together. They had bought a company over in India that was doing a bunch of outsourced RCM. So you're then cross-selling the different customers and you're taking a bunch of the labor and
so
arbitrage.
The vertical SaaS playbook.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's like the tried and true PE model. And I was doing that and I was like driving north of Boston every day, wearing, like khakis and a collared shirt in some office park. And I was like, this isn't what I want to do. And ended up, as I was sort of exploring and thinking about stuff, reconnecting with a Hamilton alum, a guy named Mark Kasdorf, who, when I was in college, to his credit, he would come up and be part of the entrepreneurship sort of like weeks. And he had started a couple businesses. And I remember talking to him a couple times at Hamilton about the surf school. And he was always great and is great at thinking about like the big vision. And he was like, you should just go build the biggest surf school in the world. Like, go figure out a way to do that. Like, this seems like a great business. Like, just go do this. And maybe if I'd done that, that would have been an interesting life, to say the least. And he was in Boston and ran a software development firm that was 10 people at the time and needed to hire a salesperson. And he's like, well, you can sell, and you sell surf school, lessons, you sell clothes, you're cold calling a bunch of other people trying to, get them to take your money. Why don't you come work for me and you can get exposed to tech and learn how software is built, and this will be a lot more fun. And I did that, and it was great. I'm so happy I did.
And you went from that, and then you slept on my couch a few times in New York City in what we used to call the Nook.
The Nook.
And then you moved to New York, and we're at Nomad Health.
I was at Nomad. Yeah, I'd been at Intrepid, which was the software development firm, for a couple of years. It was a really interesting and unique journey from a software development firm because we went from 10 people to 120 in 2 years, which is not normal for software development. We'd figured out a good way to actually build an internal training program. So the challenge then was you couldn't hire enough iOS and Android engineers. And Mark, to his credit, was like, okay, we'll just manufacture them. And built a training program that we'd bring in basically it was the apprentice program. And you'd bring in 10 to 12 people who had CS backgrounds but weren't mobile developers. So we grew really, really quickly during that time. I was like, I don't know if I really want to work at a software development firm. I'd started to get to know a bunch of VCs because I just used them as lead gen. I spoke to some people. I was like, maybe I want to do this VC thing. And people were like, you got to go operate more. And I was having a coffee with a VC that I know who's at 406 Ventures, Pyle, and she was like, you should go work for one of our portfolio companies. And she pitched me on Iora Health, which was in Boston, and then Nomad Health. And Iora was just larger at the time. There wasn't exactly the right role. And I didn't come down to New York to meet any of the Nomad team. Like, looking back, it was so strange. It was before Zoom. I probably did a Google Hangout or something and moved down and was the fifth guy and first salesperson and built around the sales team and then a business line over 4 years, and then came to Primary.
Let's talk about the Primary chapter. I'm curious to hear your side of the story on how you ended up here, because I have a very good side of the story in that too.
My side of the story. So I'd been at Nomad for 3-ish years and was sort of feeling like, I don't know if I want to stay here long-term. Great people, but just like one of these things, like the stage of the business was starting to get bigger. And I was like, I kind of want to do something different. Wasn't really sure what that was. I was like, I need to go operate. I took the GMAT. So I was like, maybe I want to go to business school. Maybe that's the thing I want to do. And that's going to be like a different path.
What'd you score?
720, 730.
Okay.
It took me a couple times to get there, though. It was not my first time. It was the first one I think I took. I got 700 and was like very frustrated by that.
I don't even know if 730 is good, by the way. It just sounded good.
It's good. It's not. It's fine. It's not where you want. We wanted to be higher than that. It was like in the range of where you needed to be. And so I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had a bunch, and I was like, I knew you were in VC. My brother ended up randomly being in VC either. Like, I didn't know what a venture capitalist was until after college. Like,
Me neither.
I grew up on Nantucket. My dad built houses. My mom works at a nonprofit and was a lawyer and all this sort of stuff. Like, I had no idea what it was. But my brother ended up working in VC, and then a couple of my other good friends did as well. It's like, this VC thing seems pretty interesting, and got more exposure to it. And I spoke to 50 funds probably.
Damn.
Over what was a 9-month period, roughly. And a lot of those conversations were, I'm not hiring, but like I knew enough people to be able to like get a conversation with people. And I'd come into the conversation super prepared. I'd like look at your portfolio. I'd understand exactly what you're interested in, regardless of what those interests were. Like, I just tried to be a chameleon and to be like, I'm going to change what my interest areas are based off of what I think you want to hear, and would try to sort of adapt. So it was like, you're the B2B SaaS guy, I'm talking about B2B SaaS. If you're the healthcare guy, I'm talking about that. And if you're the woman who's in prop tech, like I'm talking about that. And trying a lot of the app development stuff we worked with a lot of different types of clients, so I could like sort of always pull different things. And got deep in a couple processes. My brother and I would joke of being like, oh yeah, we're like both good at getting, and at the time he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do too, like good at getting to like the last round and then being like, no. And I remember being really discouraged at the time, being like, gosh. And someone said like, look, if you can get to the last round, like, and if you really want to work in venture, you'll get a job. You just have to like grind it out and make sure it's the right fit, because like just working in venture for the sake of working in venture, it's not a good thing necessarily.
It's a hard business.
It's a hard business. It's a people business. I think you can be at a lot of places that aren't ideal. And then Primer was hiring, and I think I reached out to you. I don't think you pinged me. I think, or maybe you knew I was sort of looking, and then you just removed yourself from the process entirely.
Conflict of interest, man. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel like I remember you reaching out or knowing that you were in your search process.
Yeah.
And me saying to Brad, this guy's really smart. And to your credit, like, and you just outlined it. You walked into meetings with all these different VCs and had conversations about different topics. And it wasn't like you were an inch deep. You were probably going 2 or 3 layers deep on those topics.
Yeah.
And you used to come to our old office and we would literally do business teardowns. We would tear down, I think it was like employee marketplace businesses.
Yeah, we did a lot of labor marketplace stuff.
We did a lot of
you
labor
guys are really interested at the time.
Yeah, I mean, we tore down that. We tore down like subscription companies. And I think it was just like this like natural level of curiosity that I figured would fit super, super well here. And I said to Brad, like, I don't want to be a part of the process, but like you go through it, and like if he gets to the end, like, you know, we'll figure something out. And we were down to 3 candidates that final interview stage where the tools notoriously got booted out. And Brad's like, look, I can't like hire this guy without you like going and sitting down with him if you're actually friends. I was like, all right, fine. So we scheduled drinks at the Tacombe on 24th, right across from our old office. And I remember I went into this meeting at the time. The investment team was literally me and Brad and Ben.
Yeah.
And so I walk in and I sit down and I'm like, I can't, this is like a normal conversation. And you just looked at me and you're like, you know, you got to hire me, right? Like, you guys are screwed when it comes to sourcing. And I can
said that exactly. I may have used a different word, but
I think you dropped an F-bomb in there. But yeah. And I was just like, all right, like, you do have the killer mentality side, which is like, I think in this business, it's one thing to be intellectually curious, but you also just need to be so freaking hungry. And, you know, I didn't operate with you at any point in time. We just usually had intellectual conversations. And at that point, I think I saw the inner tiger and I was like, all right, let's go for this. And now all of a sudden, we're almost here like 5 years later.
4.5.
It's crazy.
It's actually my longest held job.
Same.
At this point.
I think
you've been here for what, 7 years?
6 almost.
6?
Yeah.
6.
And we're both unemployable now, so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the venture side. So we've clearly both been highlighting the merits of long-term relationship building.
Yeah.
What value do you see in long-term relationship building and the role it's played in your career?
For me, it's everything. I think in venture in particular, you can come in and get sucked in this idea of like, I need to meet 1,000,000 people. And you can do that. And for some reason, people want to meet VCs. And it's like, it's silly at the end of the day. It's like, oh, you're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's a really interesting, great position to be in. And we're all privileged to get to like do this from a work perspective all the time. But I would much rather spend time with 5 people and get to know them really, really, really well versus 50 people and know them, just a little bit. And it's a hard balancing act, I think, in VC at first because you're like focused on sourcing and I need to get more deals. And I'm going to go talk to every other VC and try to meet 1,000,000 people. And that's going to create tons of opportunities for me. And I actually think about the majority of the deals that I've done were people that I didn't know as long as I knew you, but I'd gotten to know before an actual process was started.
How'd you find them?
Generally through other people that I knew. So there's other people that I knew who made introductions of saying, hey, I'm interested in this and I'm excited about this. And it was you should go meet Josh or you should meet Elliot or, Elliot, who's, I always distinctly remember who's the founder of Dandelion Health. He randomly ended up renting a spot in Nantucket when I was out there during COVID. And we took a walk together. And it was before, it was like a long-term relationship building and he was thinking about what he wanted to do. So for me, I love doing that. It's time consuming, but I find it a lot more rewarding. I also have 2 kids. Like I don't have time to go to every event and meet 50,000 people. What? You're the master of networking. You know everyone. So
it's just different strokes for different folks, What role did your sales skills and like experience before do you think play in your evolution as a VC so far?
I mean, we're in a sales job. 100%. Like we are selling Primary, the brand, ourselves to everyone that we're trying to give a commodity away at the end of the day, money. And you're saying, and we're trying to differentiate ourselves. And I think there is a lot of differentiation between individual partners and individual firms, but like in a lot of ways, like our job is a sales job.
But do you think it's changed too? Like when we both joined Primary, we were generalists in a way. You did B2B and I did B2C.
Yeah.
But figuring out who you wanted to go spend time with, that's evolved significantly over time, especially as you've become a go-to healthcare person.
Yeah, it's evolved in terms of, but I still think about it in the same way of being like, okay, how can I build deep relationships? And the relationships are just different. And where you're like, okay, there's relationships where I might find a great founder out of this. And there's people who work at amazing companies who I think are, maybe nodes from a talent perspective. And then as we think about the specialization side, and I spent all my time doing healthcare investing, I spent a lot of my time, probably 25, 30% of my week talking to people in the healthcare world who I don't expect to ever send me a deal, but are people who are deep in the industry, who understand the incentive structures, understand how things work. And that gets back to the like making it hopefully so I'm better at picking. I can come with a more prepared mind. And then when we really want to win something, it's here's 4 customers. Here are the people you can talk to and you can do that. So it's just different stages. And I also love that. Like it's the getting to talk to the CMO of a health plan is fascinating. To being because you get to go so deep on it. And it's a different intellectual curiosity, but I think as you go deeper in the sectors, you just keep peeling back the onion in any sector, I think in healthcare in particular, and you're like, I thought I understood this 6 months ago, but man, I didn't really understand it. And then you keep peeling back those layers and layers and layers.
What would you say to somebody though who says that specialist seed investing is a silly idea?
I think there's different models. I think if you want to compete for the best deals against every firm now, because now you have large multi-stage firms who are writing lots of checks in seed, who have very specialized teams. I don't know, as a young partner, well, I think as a younger partner, it gives me a leg up to be able to go out and do that, versus it being like, hey, I'm Sam, the guy who started a surf school at an e-commerce company, and then I did sales for a bunch of years, and like, I know a little bit about everything. I think that can totally work, but you end up, when you look at like a lot of the most storied seed investors, the world is different than it was when they were investing. The number of people writing checks is different. It was less, there's fewer founders, there's less capital going after those founders in those earlier days. And now there's way more founders, way more capital. So you have to figure out some way to differentiate yourself. And other people do it other ways. Other people do it through content. And that's, they're known because they're a media entity, or, whatever it might be.
I'm working on it.
You're working on it. Exactly. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to get those eyeballs for you.
No, but I do think like you've done some incredible things too, which is you've gone out, become super intentional about your relationship development that you're highlighting, making incredible relationships, and going super deep into business models. And when I think about how seed investing's ultimately changed now, deals move way faster than they ever did before.
Yeah.
B, we can't go talk to 20 of our friends and get a bunch of deal flow anymore, because 20 of our friends want the exact ownership that we want in the industry.
Yeah, totally.
And so, if somebody is going to come to you, you need to build proprietary deal flow, and then you do something really well, which is as soon as you meet with the company, you get them on sales calls or really impressive people within 72 hours. And then it's like, oh, okay, this guy understands my business. Whereas if a generalist gets on a board of a healthcare company and doesn't understand the difference between a payer and a PPO, they might end up in a place where like they shouldn't be on the board of that company.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's different. There's different approaches. So there's not necessarily a right or wrong approach, but I do think seed is a very different world than it was even when you started. 6 years ago, 4 years ago, like it looks different. The people that we compete with on deals are different than it was 5 years ago. Way different than it was a decade ago.
Completely. I mean, there's multi-stage firms sending armies out there running around to do, seed deals at 30 and 40, and there's a lot of micro funds, a lot of individual managers. Yeah. It's just a completely different landscape.
Yeah. How do you think about changing how you've spent your time? Like from when you came in, and maybe it's not, there's obviously your job has changed. So you're like based off of that, but like the core job of venture is like, you had to see the best deals. Yeah. You have to do the work, you have to win the deals, and then you have to support those companies that you partner with.
I mean, back in the day, it was go and build incredible networks of people and see great deals, through them. And now it's about meeting people earlier, like you do, and getting to know them really well, and then building out expert networks and customer networks really quickly so you can go ahead and get those folks in front of those people to win those deals, but also to learn. And so I think the biggest change for me, though, over the last couple of years, and not the beginning of my time at Primary, is more the idea of like, okay, I'm on, maybe 10 boards. Yeah. And, we have a firm that we've scaled together from 6 people to almost 50 people now. And we're incubating companies. And so how do you split your time? A lot of the outbound stuff is not something I have a lot of time for anymore, but I can do a lot of one-to-many type solutions for sourcing. And then I can do a lot of one-to-one with portfolio companies and deep sources of knowledge, which are the kind of the things that you were talking about before.
Yeah. Do you like your job more today, or if you could do the same job you were doing when you started as a principal?
It's just a different job, man. I used to say it was the same job, different firm. Now it's like very different
not the same job anymore.
No, it's I think the challenges and the experiences are new, which makes it interesting. Yeah. Whereas I think if I were doing the same thing and running around, like sometimes I look at our principals and our analysts and I'm like, damn, I miss doing that. Because like you do, it was fun.
Totally. Yeah.
But I don't think you could do that for 30 years. Whereas like what we're starting to do now and trying to play these asymmetric upside games by incubating and, building out these incredible networks, that is a fun challenge in a new way.
Yeah.
But who knows? We'll see what the next chapter holds.
A lot of time ahead of us.
Yeah. Any advantages to having a brother in the venture capital business, by the way?
Yeah. For those who don't know, my brother, Henry, works at Left Lane. He joined right when it got started. Yeah, it's great, obviously. It's great in two ways. One, he's a growth investor, so we don't compete, which is a plus. From a trust building perspective, especially when I was getting started, but even still today, it's really beneficial for both of us because I know someone well, he might know someone well, and it's like, oh, well, I like Sam, and sure, I assume I'm going to like Henry too. So they're like very easy introductions to make. And I think when I first started, we did that a ton, but still today, oh, can you talk to my brother about this? And who also works at Venture Fund. And that's a very easy thing. And people come in, especially if they know him or know me on the other side, I think with their guards down in a different sort of way.
They're like, you better be as smart as him.
Yeah, obviously. You've got a bigger head, but it's okay. We both have big heads.
Right.
And then, the learnings are...
The
learnings are very powerful, especially given the stage that he sits, because I get to have conversations. How would you think about this business? We're looking at the seed stage. This is what needs to be true for the Series A, Series B. Would that excite you? What other companies have you seen that looked or felt like that? So
I think that piece, by the way, is where both of us spend way more time today than we ever did before.
Yeah, true.
Talking to downstream investors, talking to investment bankers, talking to private equity firms, and like getting the learnings from them, because people always joke how like VCs aren't that smart. They just see a lot of things. Well, it turns out growth investors and private equity investors and bankers see even more than us.
Yeah, totally. They have access to different information. So
exactly. All right. Last question for you that I didn't put on our little prep doc, but here you go. You asked me if I'm having more fun. Where do you want to be in 10 years from now with this thing?
Where do I want to be in 10 years from now? I want to be known as the best early stage healthcare investor in the world.
I love it.
So
I just want to be on a bunch of publicly traded boards, at that point.
Yeah, that's part of it. You have to do that. There you go.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you joining me, man. This was fun.
Yeah, of course.